You ever notice how the biggest questions in life never really go away? Like, no matter how much technology advances or how many podcasts people listen to, we're still wrestling with the same problems humans were talking about 1,000 years ago. Questions like, what's the ultimate source of truth? Do we rely on faith or do we trust reason? Can science and religion ever really coexist? Or are they destined to clash? Well, if you want to see the original cage fight of those questions, you got to look at the showdown between two absolute titans of the Islamic Golden Age, Imam Al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd, who in the West was called Averroes. These dudes weren't just scholars, they were intellectual warriors, and their debate didn't just stay in their own time. It literally shaped the future of Islamic thought, Christian philosophy, and even the way we in the modern world think about religion and science. So let's dive into it. Setting the stage, the Islamic Golden Age. First, you got to understand the world they were living in. We're talking about the 11th and 12th centuries during what's often called the Islamic Golden Age. This was a time when the Muslim world was the center of global learning. Think about Baghdad with its House of Wisdom. Think about Cordoba in Muslim Spain with libraries that had hundreds of thousands of manuscripts when Europe barely had a few scattered ones. You had scholars translating Greek texts, Indian mathematics, Persian astronomy. There was this insane fusion of knowledge happening. It's like if you combined Silicon Valley, Oxford, MIT, and NASA into one giant hub of ideas. That was the vibe. And into that mix, philosophy, especially Greek philosophy from Aristotle and Plato, was making waves. Muslims were translating it, commenting on it, and trying to see how it fit with Islam. But here's the problem. Not everything lined up. The Greeks had some views about the universe, the soul, and God that didn't quite match the Quran. So you get this tension. Do we stick strictly to revelation, or do we let philosophy and reason push the boundaries? And that's where our two heavyweights come in. If you're ranking Islamic scholars, this guy's in the top 5, no question. He wasn't just a philosopher, he was also a jurist, a theologian, a mystic, and one of the most brilliant minds Islam ever produced. By his mid-30s, Ghazali was already the top professor at the Nizamiya Madrasa in Baghdad, which was basically the Harvard of the Muslim world. He had prestige, students, money, the whole deal. But here's where it gets interesting. He has this massive existential crisis. He starts doubting everything, his teaching, his knowledge, even his intentions. He literally loses his ability to speak in lectures. He's like, am I just doing this for fame? Am I really close to God, or am I just showing off? So he walks away from it all. He abandons his position, goes into spiritual retreat, wanders for years, and basically rebuilds his life around Sufism, Islamic spirituality, and direct experience of God. When he comes back, he writes some of the most powerful works in Islamic history, including The Incoherence of the Philosophers, Tahafud al-Philosophe. And in that book, he goes after philosophy with the intensity of a UFC fighter in the first round. What was Ghazali's beef with philosophy? So what was Ghazali so mad about? Well, he thought that some Muslim philosophers who followed Aristotle and Plato had gone too far. They weren't just borrowing tools from philosophy, they were rewriting Islamic beliefs in ways that contradicted the Quran. Ghazali lays out 20 problems he sees with these philosophers, but he says 3 of them are so bad that they actually make someone an unbeliever. The eternity of the universe. Philosophers like Ibn Sina, Avicenna said the universe had no beginning, it always existed. Aristotle believed that too. But Islam teaches creation. God created the universe at a specific moment in time. Ghazali's like, if you say the universe is eternal, you're basically denying God's role as creator. God only knows universals, not particulars. Some philosophers claimed God only knows general truths, like the laws of physics, but not specific events or individuals. Ghazali's like, dude, what? If God doesn't know about you or me, what's the point of prayer, judgment, or guidance? No bodily resurrection. Philosophers argued that after death, only the soul survives in a purely spiritual way. But the Quran clearly talks about physical resurrection, bodies rising on the day of judgment. Ghazali says if you deny that, you're rejecting scripture outright. So his whole point was philosophy can be useful, but when it contradicts revelation, it's gotta go. Otherwise you risk losing not just your mind, but your soul. Q's enter Ibn Rushd, Averroes. Now, on the other side of the ring, we've got Ibn Rushd. Born in 1126 in Cordoba, Spain, this guy was a polymath too. Judge, physician and one of the greatest philosophers of his era. If Ghazali was like Habib Nurmagomedov, locking you down with submission holds, Ibn Rushd was like Anderson Silva, countering with sharp precision and style. Europe later called him the commentator because his writings on Aristotle became the go-to texts for centuries. Thomas Aquinas, Christian scholastics, they were all reading Ibn Rushd. So when Ibn Rushd read Ghazali's Incoherence of the Philosophers, he wasn't impressed. He thought Ghazali misunderstood Aristotle and misrepresented philosophy. So he clapped back with his own book called The Incoherence of the Incoherence. Yeah, he literally trolled Ghazali's title. That's some savage medieval shade right there. Third, Ibn Rushd's defense of philosophy. For Ibn Rushd, the key idea was this: truth cannot contradict truth. If both revelation and reason are from God, then they have to agree at the deepest level. So if philosophy seems to contradict religion, it means either we misunderstood revelation or we misunderstood philosophy. But the contradiction can't be real. He divides people into three groups. In the masses, they understand through scripture stories and simple explanations. The theologians, they use dialectical arguments to defend faith. The philosophers, the elite minds who can handle demonstration, logical proofs, and abstract reasoning. And here's the kicker. Ibn Rushd says scripture itself tells us to reflect, to think, to reason. So using philosophy isn't betraying religion, it's fulfilling it. The clash in simple terms. So here's the cage match. Averroes. Ghazali's corner philosophy is dangerous. It oversteps its bounds, confuses people, and risks leading believers astray. Revelation has the final word. Ibn Rushd's corner philosophy is necessary. Reason and revelation go hand in hand. If you abandon philosophy, you're abandoning one of God's greatest gifts. And this wasn't just a friendly debate, it had real consequences. Ghazali's influence basically ended the golden age of philosophy in the Eastern Islamic world. Scholars turned more toward theology and mysticism. Meanwhile, Ibn Rushd's works got translated into Latin and became a cornerstone of the European Renaissance. Crazy twist, the Muslim world sidelined him, but Europe built on him. All right, so we've set the stage. We've got Al-Ghazali on one side, shutting down philosophy when it messes with revelation. We've got Ibn Rushd on the other, saying philosophy and religion are two paths to the same truth. But the real question is, what happened next? Who won this debate? And why does it matter to us in 2025 when we're scrolling TikTok and arguing about AI ethics? The aftermath in the Muslim world. So here's the thing. In the Islamic East, Baghdad, Persia, Central Asia, Ghazali's influence was massive. After he dropped Incoherence of the Philosophers, philosophy kind of lost its shine. Scholars leaned more toward theology, kalam and mysticism, Sufism. It wasn't like people stopped thinking critically, but philosophy as an independent discipline kind of died out. Instead of Aristotle and Plato, the intellectual energy went into law, spirituality, and defending orthodoxy. Now, some people say this was the moment Islamic civilization started to decline scientifically. That's probably oversimplified, but there's some truth to it, because when you discourage free philosophical speculation, you lose a certain kind of innovation. Meanwhile, in Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus Ibn Rushd kept the flame of philosophy alive. But here's the twist. He actually got exiled for his views. Toward the end of his life, he fell out of favor with the ruling powers, who thought his ideas were too dangerous. He died kind of sidelined, not really celebrated in his own community. Europe picks it up. But Europe? Dude, Europe loved him. Latin translations of Ibn Rushd's commentaries on Aristotle spread like wildfire. Christian scholars and universities ate it up. You had Thomas Aquinas wrestling with him. You had the so-called Latin Averroists in Paris who pushed radical ideas like the double truth theory, that religion could be true in one sense and philosophy in another. That freaked the church out, but it also forced them to sharpen their own arguments. So here's the irony. Ibn Rushd was more influential in Christian Europe than in the Muslim world. And Al-Ghazali, who shut down philosophy, became the superstar in Islam. It's like the two civilizations swapped their champions. Why this matters today. Now let's bring this back to us, because you might be thinking, cool story, Joe, but I'm not exactly losing sleep over 12th century philosophers. But think about it, we're still fighting the same battles. When people argue about whether evolution contradicts the Bible or the Quran, That's Ghazali versus Rushdie. When people debate whether AI and science can explain consciousness or whether there's something transcendent, that's Ghazali versus Rushdie. When you hear people saying science has all the answers versus people saying without faith, life is meaningless, that's Ghazali versus Rushdie. It's like their fight never ended, we're just replaying it with new costumes. Joe Rogan analogy mode, here's how I think of it. Imagine you're at the UFC, you've got two fighters with completely different styles. Ghazali's like Khabib, he's saying stick to fundamentals, stick to what works, don't get flashy, stay close, smother the opponent, don't let reason run wild or you'll get submitted. Ibn Rushd's like Anderson Silva using angles, creativity, saying let the art flow, man, truth is truth, and if you know how to read it, philosophy and revelation move together, both are legit, both can win, but it depends on what fight you want to have. Kepler's the deeper philosophical takeaway. Here's what blows my mind. Neither guy was anti-God. This wasn't atheism versus religion. It was two religious geniuses trying to figure out how far the human mind can go in understanding the divine. Ghazali says if you trust your brain too much, you'll end up lost. Revelation is the map. Ibn Rushd says God gave you that brain for a reason. Not using it fully is like wasting a gift. It's kinda like hiking. Ghazali saying don't leave the trail, you'll get lost in the forest. Ibn Rushd is saying yeah, but if you only stay on the trail, you'll never see the hidden waterfalls and peaks. The ripple effects on civilization. This debate literally shaped civilization. In the Muslim world, Ghazali's path meant philosophy faded, but spirituality deepened. You get incredible poetry from Rumi, you get profound mystical traditions, but you don't get the same push in physics or biology that Europe later developed. In Europe, Ibn Rushd's legacy fueled scholasticism, the Renaissance, and eventually the scientific revolution. By the time Galileo and Newton show up, that spark of combining reason with faith was burning strong. So when people ask why did Europe advance scientifically while the Muslim world slowed down, this debate is one of the big pieces of the puzzle. Joe Rogan reflects, to me, this isn't about who was right, it's about balance. If you go all Ghazali, you risk shutting down curiosity and innovation. If you go all Ibn Rushd, you risk intellectual arrogance and detachment from faith. Maybe the real wisdom is in finding a middle ground, using reason as far as it can go, but recognizing its limit. Because think about it, science can tell you how stars form, how evolution works, how the brain fires, but it can't tell you what love means, why beauty hits your soul, or why we feel awe at the universe. That's where faith or spirituality steps in. On the flip side, if you only rely on revelation without reason, you might misinterpret texts, fall for superstitions, or shut down progress. Reason is the check that keeps faith honest. Fast forward to now, look at where we're at today with it. We've built machines that can mimic human conversation, solve problems, even write poetry. Some people are saying AI will explain everything about consciousness, eventually. That's pure Ibn Rushd energy, trusting reason to unlock every mystery. But others are saying, nah, consciousness is a divine mystery. You can't reduce it to algorithms. That's Ghazali energy. Same with the multiverse theory. Science says maybe there are infinite universes. Faith says God created this one for a purpose. Again, Rushdie versus Ghazali, just in modern clothes. Final thoughts. So here's how I see it, man. The fight between Al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd wasn't about picking one side forever. It was about keeping the tension alive. Like a bow and arrow, you need both the string pulled back, faith, and the bow pushing forward, reason to launch into truth. Their debate is a reminder that humans will always wrestle with mystery. We'll always be torn between trusting our minds and trusting something higher. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the struggle itself is what keeps us growing. So next time you hear someone arguing about science and religion or philosophy and faith, just know you're hearing echoes of a debate that started almost 1,000 years ago between a mystic from Persia and a philosopher from Spain. And the fact that we're still talking about it, that's how you know they were both onto something.